challenge begins in the mid-19th century with the King family. We have three families, and the Kings probably get, I would say, the furthest socially out of the rest of the families, but they started off with very humble beginnings. They were originally a bit of a farming family. Of course, they couldn't really afford very much land, and so they spent their time really painting to make a little bit of money on the side, as well as tending to their gardens. Of course, they start off really quickly wanting to, grow their family, because if they're going to have a little bit more land, they need some kids to take care of it. And Howard decides to actually join the costermonger career, which is the first career that I custom made. Catherine gives birth to their first child, a daughter, very early in the challenge. This is Georgina Harriet King. She is the first kid we have in the whole neighborhood, and Catherine and Howard really do struggle a bit to take care of her, as well as taking care of the house. Catherine, however, gets pregnant with her second baby, but unfortunately does lose the baby in a miscarriage. Interestingly enough, Howard doesn't seem to care and just goes to sleep while his wife is sobbing, and that is a whole thing. Georgina ages up into a child, not exactly in a great way. A lot of the kids in the early challenge really kind of struggle with their age ups, but she's adorable. I love Georgina, and this is kind of the state of the house. It's our first winter of the challenge, and we're going to lose a lot of our plants. Unfortunately, we lost a good portion of our harvest, which is very bad. Catherine gets pregnant again. This is her third pregnancy, and thankfully, this one actually does end in a baby. So she has her second baby actually born alive. This is Philippa, and we all know and love Philippa. She really becomes a great facet of the entire neighborhood. Life passes by really quickly, and Philippa ages up into a toddler. She's absolutely adorable, and this is still when I have a bit of an issue with my custom skin tones being reverse geneticized. We do fix that pretty quickly, thankfully, but until then, we do have a bit of a darker skin tone for Philippa. She and her sister have a really great relationship. Philippa and Georgina are the best of friends, despite really a bit of an age gap. Catherine goes into labor again, and thankfully has another healthy baby. This is actually their heir. So we are welcoming into the world Cornelius. The house gets a little bit of an update. Thankfully, they've been able to sell enough items from their home produce stand. They don't own their own place yet. Unfortunately, we also get robbed, but that happens. We have our first community lot in the entire neighborhood now. This is St. Philip's Parish. So pretty much everyone in the neighborhood is a member of St. Philip's Parish at this point because it's our only parish. We will later on, of course, be dividing the parishes by neighborhood, and so there will be several different parishes. Catherine really struggles with a bit of, I wouldn't even call it postpartum depression. I would just call it full-on raging depression. She's lost a lot of babies, and things do start to look up for the King family. However, as you can see, we purchase our first grocery store. It's time for Philippa to age up as well. And we invite over some friends of the neighborhood to help celebrate. This is finally a moment where the Kings kind of feel like their life is actually really stable, and Catherine is hopefully starting to kind of get over some of that depression. Cornelius ages up into a child as well. He's absolutely adorable with such a baby face. And it is time for the first wedding of the challenge. So Georgina King is marrying the one, the only Benjamin Holloway. The Holloways also become a huge facet of the neighborhood, despite the fact that they're actually not a main family. So Georgina moves into what is probably the most affluent household in the entire neighborhood thus far. So Georgina marries very, very well, and this is a big step up from where she came from. We also have our very first vignette introducing Renaud Lawson. This is, I think, a pretty big moment stylistically that we encounter in the challenge because it sort of sets the tone for a lot of new drama and storytelling that is going to play. The neighborhood is still pretty small, but it's grown a lot from just 3 households. So we do have a couple extra houses in the neighborhood now. We have a few community lots. I think we've got 3. And Philippa is probably the most cheerful sim in the entire neighborhood. She goes to meet Renaud, originally thinking that she might take on the position as a maid that he's currently hiring for. However, Renaud doesn't exactly think that she is cut out for the position, but instead he's absolutely smitten with her and ends up proposing to Philippa and making her his bride. Unfortunately, he gets married in this absolutely horrible non-period appropriate outfit, but you know, mistakes happen. It's fine. I still don't have thoughts about it. It is basically love at first sight, and once they're alone together, you can really see that they're just very, very well matched and suited. Benjamin and Georgina also begin working on expanding their family as well. They have a pretty good relationship. This is their first daughter, Charlotte Millie Holloway. Oh, I love Charlotte. And look at those Holloway eyes. This is kind of the beginning of the Holloway eyes that we will see threading themselves throughout the neighborhood. Philippa begins to discover a love of tea and growing tea and making herbal teas especially. And so this kind of plants the seed for her that maybe she actually wants to do something with her life other than just raise a family. Yet, Philippa loves babies so much. This is her firstborn son, Nathaniel, and gosh, he ages up so quickly, and she realizes how much she loves having kids too. But with the help of their maid, Winnie Jung, I believe that's Winnie Jung, or she marries to become Winnie Jung. I think she's actually Winnie Harvey. They set up their first tea shop. Now, Cornelius meets the lovely Louisa Sully. And Louisa Sully comes from a bit of a farming family in the neighborhood. They have cows and sheep, and they make cheese and milk and stuff like that. And pretty quickly decides that he actually wants to court her. So Catherine comes to chaperone her son and future daughter-in-law. And it's already time for elders. I can't believe it. Howard is aging up into an elder. And of course with a little bit of fanfare, but not too much because it's Howard and he's a very non-fuss kind of sim, you know? I mean, he doesn't fuss when his wife has kids, but of course we do have some family and friends in the neighborhood, mostly to celebrate Catherine. Catherine's really the one who is really interested in the celebrations, and we've got some exciting things happening. So Charlotte ages up into a child, and Georgina is pregnant with her next kid. I realize at this point that we have firstborn syndrome happening when Augusta comes out looking like a clone of Charlotte, but you know, I do my very best to kind of work with the challenge and make them look kind of different. So the house also gets an update, the Holloway house. We can see here that the graveyard in front of St. Philip's Parish is also growing. It's not very big yet, but oh boy, will it get there. Philippa and Georgina essentially deck out the entire church. They put in a lot of money for the big king wedding of their heir, Cornelius, to Louisa Sully. And so some of the decoration actually does end up staying for the rest of the challenge, quite sentimentally. And when we see these flowers in the church for the rest of the challenge, we can think back to Cornelius and Louisa's really romantic, lovely wedding. They're very well suited. It's honestly very impressive how well each of these marriages went for the king children. The Holloway daughters also are growing up well. Charlotte and Augusta are really good friends, and you can see that I kind of like changed their hair up a bit to make them look different. Also, we have a third daughter, unfortunately succumbed to the firstborn syndrome, Caroline, as well. Charlotte ages up into a teenager, and we also, back at the main household, get a genie's lamp. I went back and forth as to whether or not I was going to let them use the genie's lamp, but ultimately I decided to let them take the money from it. And narrative-wise, I attribute this to a wedding gift from Georgina, who is married to Renaud Lawson, the mayor of New Whitby. So we have our first baby in the King household. This is Ernest, and he is the third generation heir to the new King estate, which is, I guess I wouldn't call it an estate yet, but it is much nicer and more decorated than it has been in the past. You can see that we have really built it up. We also build St. Philip's Gardens, which is a lovely little garden in the center of town, and I send these two out to, just like have a little good time, do some fishing. This is Albert Harvey. He has no relevance per se to the actual plot of the King household. I just love him. Ernest is aging up into a toddler, and his mortality roles, of course, went very, very well, as you know if you've watched the season. Philippa and Renaud have such a special relationship. Here's Nathaniel, their eldest. He's aged up as well. We have a bunch of other kids. Philippa has like 6 kids. This is Louis. Unfortunately, Louis doesn't end up surviving very long. I think he dies as a toddler. And also at the Lawson household, we have Teresa Price moving in to become a governess. Back in the main household, Howard is kind of making up for the fact that he was a bad father in the beginning and hangs out with the kids. Daisy is born, our beloved Daisy. This is their second child. And Louisa is absolutely smitten with her kids. Unfortunately, it's time for a bout of sickness. This is, I think, our first really big issue with the flu that we are going to be calling tuberculosis in the neighborhood. So Ernest ages up into a child. I completely forgot about his birthday, and he ages up just in the nursery because, also we have the flu running around town, and I don't want this family to get sick just yet. I'm trying to kind of keep everyone quarantined, but that's proving a lot harder than I anticipated. So Daisy ages up into a toddler as well. She's adorable. Both kids really look a lot like Louisa. I'm hoping, of course, that we have a couple more kids. Unfortunately, Louisa does end up having a miscarriage. This is her first miscarriage, and hopefully her only miscarriage. I was really hoping we don't end up like her poor mother-in-law. Howard gets struck by lightning, and it's time for Daisy to age up into a child. She does not age up very well in the slightest, and this kind of really sets the tone for the way that Daisy is going to live her life through the rest of the challenge. She's a spitfire, and boy does she let you know it. It's time for Howard, our first sim, to die of old age, to pass on. He's not exactly ready, probably because he didn't fulfill any of his lifetime wants for the most part. Life was challenging, and they could really not spend the extra time focusing on all of those extra, wants and desires. Louisa gives birth to not 2 babies, but 3. That's right, she has triplets. And a lot of you may have actually forgotten this because only, 2 of them actually make it into adulthood. So we have Charles, Marisol, and Alexandra. So I think this is the first set of triplets we've had in the entire challenge, which is just chaos, but also weirdly enough sets the tone for another set of triplets to happen shortly afterwards. So there we go. We have 5 kids in the King household, and that is where Louisa kind of ends her pregnancies for the moment. This is also the only family portrait I take. Meanwhile, back at the Lawson household, Philippa and Renaud are really, really enjoying their life. They have so many kids. They have a lot of boys, and they're all just best friends. Renaud unfortunately passes away to the tuberculosis outbreak in town. It's really tragic, and he didn't roll to die. This was actually more of a narrative play because of some other things that are going to happen in town. We also lose Mr. Holloway. I don't even remember his first name. But Ernest is aging up into a teenager, which is really exciting because we can sort of start considering a romantic prospect for him as well. And he actually ends up becoming a pleasure sim, which is not something I expected at all. It's also time for the triplets to age up, which I'm not excited about because there are so many, and I mean, I don't know if it's worse to have 3 babies or 3 toddlers. But Alexandra also succumbs to the tuberculosis outbreak, which is really unfortunate for poor Louisa. You can see that she is absolutely beside herself in aspiration failure, and we can hardly blame her because, gosh, losing a toddler and, you know, pretty soon after having a miscarriage, like, she's definitely been through it. The whole household is really in some form of chaos. We have the social bunny come, the only time in the challenge so far that the social bunny has come, and it's time to have a little wake to unfortunately celebrate the passing of Alexandra. It's now time for the triplets, well, now twins, I guess. Do we still call them triplets if one of the triplets dies? I don't know. It's time for them to grow up into children. And Cornelius is really still sick. This tuberculosis outbreak is becoming out of hand. I originally had intended for Ernest and this is Annalise Harvey to have a bit of a courtship. And so we do begin their courtship. We have Annalise come over, and Daisy is kind of like, wow, this girl is ridiculously proper. Like, I'm sure she'll be great for my brother, but she wouldn't be great for me. But they still develop a bit of a friendship. And so this is Flora. Flora is Philippa's only daughter. I think she's adorable. She looks so much like Renaud, which makes me really, really sad, considering the fact that he's now dead. So Philippa is preparing for her first son's wedding. And this is Beatrice Wendland. She was actually a townie in the neighborhood, but we are saying that they met at Cambridge, and her father was a history professor there. And so Nathaniel and Beatrice are getting married. It's kind of hard to believe that Philippa's baby is already getting married. But we have the little ceremony just outside of the tea gardens and celebrate with the reception in the back of the tea shop, which is really kind of our only hosting space at the moment. You can see that the flu is not getting better. This tuberculosis situation is really, really bad at this point. I think it's infected pretty much most of the neighborhood, which is, oh boy, not good. So it's time to move in a doctor. Now, this quaint, adorable cottage belongs to Septimus Oliver. Listen, I love Septimus. I think Septimus is probably one of my favorite Sims that I've ever created. He was a Pooklet Sim. He was wonderful. And so because we have a doctor in town now, I allow the Holloways here, this is Lydia, to use the genie to cure the illness. So you can see that 11 diseases have been cured. I'm honestly shocked that it's only 11, but to be fair, we have like 7 families in the entire town. So it's still a lot. I continue trying to have Ernest and Annalise court. However, you can see that Ernest is a bit silly, and that is not exactly going over very well with Annalise. She really is not clicking with Ernest at all. And Annalise, although very proper, has a lot of opinions, and her opinion on Ernest is not great. So this whole courtship is not going easy for me. The kids bring home a girl. This is Rosabelle. Rosabelle is the daughter of Della, who some of you probably remember. Della is from Lady Simmer's neighborhood. So Della and her kids come to New Whitby to escape some personal things, and this is when Rosabelle meets Ernest for the first time. It's time for the twins to age up. We have Charles aging up into a teenager, and we also have Marisol. We have a surprising amount of pleasure sims in this neighborhood, considering the fact that I hate pleasure sims because they're always miserable in historical times. So Louisa is pregnant once more, and unfortunately the pregnancy is ending in a very traumatic way. Something is very, very wrong. She's preterm, and so we call over Septimus, who comes to help with the delivery and smooth things over as well as possible. Daisy ends up helping him and is not squeamish at all by the sight of blood, of the trauma of potentially her mother dying. Things are very, very tense, but it's a really formative moment for her because it gives Daisy a lot of personal meaning and experience that she wouldn't otherwise get to have. Septimus is just enamored by how well she is able to help out in the room and offers for her to be a midwife alongside him. We also have a new community lot. This is the Wendland Lawson Theater, and it is big and beautiful and ornate, and Beatrice is actually a ballerina from London, and so she is going to give several performances and also teach some of the girls in the neighborhood ballet. So this gives a lot of the women in town a bit of an extracurricular as they are growing up, which I think is really fun. And we also have season box passes, and Septimus, in thanks for getting the town over tuberculosis, is gifted a box for the season, which otherwise would be very expensive. Now, something really weird begins to happen in the King household. Daisy and Ernest are not getting along. I'm not sure what's going on, but it is a problem. And Annalise actually goes out on a limb and falls for Charles, Ernest's brother. I wasn't expecting this. This happened entirely autonomously because I do have ACR, and so my Sims sometimes decide who they want as opposed to who I want them to want. And so not only do they have a kiss here, but Annalise is aging up into an adult. We know that Charles is pretty significantly younger than her. They were both teenagers at the same time, but Annalise is definitely a lot older than him. She would be more suitably matched to Ernest. This is also Craig Ray. He has no relevance, but everyone hates Craig Ray. So Annalise, after aging up into an adult, actually does go to woohoo with Charles upstairs in their parents' bedroom of all places. And for some godforsaken reason, Daisy walks in on the matter. Now, Daisy wants nothing to do with this scandal, and so she does end up telling her parents. But before that comes to fruition, we are losing Benjamin Holloway, and boy does he not want to go. This is to old age, not tuberculosis. Our tuberculosis outbreak is over for the time being. It's unfortunate because we have the whole family over at a dinner party when he dies, and Georgina loses her partner. Now, Augusta is also married now to Avery, Mr. Avery, Lawrence Avery, and wow, that's the end of one of the first romances of our neighborhood, which is really unfortunate. So Louisa takes her kids over to the Sully farm. This is where she grew up. The kids, well, they have a pretty cushy life, and Louisa thinks it's important for them to see where they come from and where her family was not too long ago. The kids don't really know what to do with this information and end up just kind of fighting each other the whole time and not really getting along with Alston here or anyone else in the neighborhood. It's absolutely a bit of a nightmare. Louisa really regrets bringing her kids here because they're pure drama and chaos. Like, I can't get Daisy and Ernest to stop fighting. They just do not get along. Daisy has a very strong personality, and I think Ernest is a little bit more mild. And so I'm imagining that Daisy is probably instigating everything. And now they're enemies, which is just great. So the reason we're back at the tea gardens, however, is for Charles and Annalise to get married because they were caught in a compromised situation and their families were informed about it and involved. And so they all thought it was best to get them married as quick as possible, despite what these two actually had to say about it. So this is Rosabelle. We saw her a little bit earlier as a child. She's now a teenager. She's a very athletic and energetic sim, which I think is a really interesting compliment to Ernest's kind of mild-mannered temperament. Well, despite his fighting with Daisy, but as I said, that's on Daisy, not him. And so I kind of envision, I really love Rosabelle and would love for her to marry into a main family. So I kind of envision them having a bit of a courtship. However, you know, it's a bit of a slow burn. She's slightly younger than him, and so it's gonna take a little while, especially as Ernest is now aging up into a teenager. We do have a bunch of people over. You can see Della and Bertie as well. However, oh, he's a family sim, not a pleasure sim. He goes into aspiration failure very quickly upon aging up, probably because he's constantly fighting with his sister, and as a family sim, that is just not going well for him. So Septimus invites Daisy to help out with another labor. This is Marcella Lawson. She is married to, I think, Harrison, one of Philippa's sons. And so she's helping out with a particularly complicated labor here as well. And it goes so well. Daisy has the time of her life, and caught up in those moments, she and Septimus actually share their first kiss. She's a little shocked by this, but from this moment on, Daisy and Septimus both realize that things can't go back to the way that they were. Of course, they are partners in medicine, but also becoming partners in real life. It's time for Philippa's family to move out of the glass house on Mulberry Street, their first house as a family, because the family has grown to the extent where they've really outgrown the house. Their new house, however, does have a nod to their original home with this giant window, as well as a lovely, like, terrarium greenhouse here. I just love their new house. I spent so much time decorating it, and it can really hold the 2 to 3 generations that are living there at the moment. And Philippa's actually now married to her second husband. This is Maurice O'Neilly. You can see behind him Jasper O'Neilly. Jasper gets the bad end of the stick every time. I think he looks so silly. Like, he got all of his dad's tragic looks. It's pretty unfortunate. Now it's time for a new community lot. This is the horse stables. There is a garden and walking trails in front of it, and a little bit of an area to have like some town carnivals and festivals. And so we have picnics and carousels and lots of really fun, cute things. And Ernest and Rosabelle are still developing their relationship here. They are getting closer and closer, and they just have a very sweet relationship. It's time for Daisy to age up into an adult. It's kind of hard to believe for me. I have a lot of attachment to Daisy. I don't know. She's one of my favorite Sims. She's just such a character. And so she ages up into an adult. I give her this kind of sensible outfit that would be prudent for a midwife, and she and Septimus are still very obviously courting. It's apparent to the entire town that they are courting. And so he goes ahead and ends up proposing to Daisy. And I'm so excited for this because they've been a little bit of a slow burn, but we all knew they would one day end up together. And so, of course, when he proposes, Daisy says yes, and her whole family is excited because, well, to be honest, they never knew what was going to happen with Daisy because she's a bit of a wild character and she's a little unpredictable. Unfortunately, everyone's starting to get sick in the neighborhood again, but they do move into a new house, and there's also a new church. This is St. Catherine's Cathedral. Oh, I spent so much time decorating this. But Philippa and her friends and family gather at the new church to celebrate a wedding, and a really fun wedding at that. This is one of the bigger events that we've had. So this is Flora, Philippa's only daughter, and Nicholas Elmstone. If I'm remembering correctly, Nicholas Elmstone was built or created by Jolie. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but he just has that gorgeous vibe that Jolie created. You know what I'm saying if you've been to our Pooklet parties. Like, she creates the most beautiful Sims. So they get married, and then we also have some time at the pool hall. I'm not even here with Daisy. I'm not here. And yet, oh my gosh, she sleeps with Cecil Harvey. Autonomously. I'm not even controlling her. And she's not engaged to Cecil. Ugh, it's a whole thing. And so we have some more courtship that's actually starting to formally begin between Ernest and Rosabelle. Louisa and Della are also really good friends, so this is something that they've always wanted to see happen, because Della grew up on an orchard, Louisa grew up on a farm, and they both married pretty decently and stably. And Rosabelle is starting to become a little bit of a Spitfire as well. She's so young, and she's just not ready for courtship, even though her family and Ernest are both ready. It's not that she doesn't like Ernest, it's just that she wants a little bit more space and time. As you might be able to tell, Daisy is pregnant, which is a whole ordeal. She asks their maid, Meredith Ellis, for some help acquiring a bit of a potion or something to help get rid of the pregnancy. Unfortunately, the maid is livid by this, and she is not able to acquire anything to terminate the pregnancy, and Septimus, who is a doctor, can obviously see that she is pregnant. He knows that it is not his, and ends up breaking up their engagement in one of the worst moments of my sim life, because I loved them together so much. But unfortunately, it had to be done. And moving onward, it's finally time for Rosabelle and Ernest to get married. Rosabelle still has some reservations about the whole thing, but she understands the obligation to their families that it is time for her to get married to Ernest. So she doesn't actually, reject the marriage. She goes through with the wedding, and it's the wedding of the century. I mean, it's taking place in the theater, which is huge, and there are live ballerina dancers. And do you see how many people are here? I mean, there's a third row. There is a third row too. There are so many Sims. And we all retire back at the newest lot. This is a bit of a community lot intended specifically for events. So it's an event center, and it's owned by the Lawsons and the Kings, I think, and the Prices jointly. Like, the women in the family just kind of like joined together. Cornelius is really struggling to have a good time knowing what is going on with his daughter. Ernest and Rosabelle do decide to wait on their first woohoo for when she is ready, and so they just kind of have a nice little cuddle instead of actually woohooing. So that just takes a little bit more time. Daisy, obviously pregnant at this point, is just ready to get out of the house. She understands that she's causing her family sim father a lot of distress, and so she thinks it's time just to remove herself from the situation. She takes her inheritance and purchases a little cottage with an orchard out back. I think they're peaches. It's so cute. I love this cottage. I built it. It's, I believe, available for download for you guys somewhere. If you want it and you can't find it, just let me know. Now, Septimus is not going to, stay hung up on Daisy forever. He ends up falling in love with Alice from Simberry. So if you guys are familiar with Cupcakey Plays or the magical blog of Simberry, that is where Alice is from. She is her sim self, and we needed someone just as beautiful and magnificent as Septimus for him to actually have an equal. And so they get married in St. Catherine's Cathedral with a small community, because Septimus is still kind of new to the town, and despite the fact that he saved the whole town from tuberculosis, people are a little standoffish to newcomers, and not only is he a newcomer, but Alice is a newcomer as well. So I like to imagine that they really bonded over some of the animosity in town towards them from both being outsiders, and they have a lovely wedding. Daisy at this point has her daughter Ebba. It's been several years, and Ebba is already a child. Now, Cornelius is still really, really struggling. He never quite recovers from the social scandal that is surrounding his daughter, and Daisy was like his baby. Like, he's such a girl dad. It's kind of tragic. Ernest and Rosabelle, she's a little bit older now, and they go out really on one of their first dates as a couple that's not courting, like a couple that's married, and she lets him be a little bit more affectionate with her. And so at the main household, we have a big Christmas celebration, a big Michaelmas celebration, and we invite over a lot of family and some distant relatives for the Kings to celebrate everyone. It's also Rosabelle's adult birthday, which is super exciting because we were waiting for Rosabelle to celebrate her adult birthday so that she and Ernest could, start having kids. I don't normally make my Sims wait. It just felt more appropriate for her character to wait. And gosh, she's adorable. Cornelius ages up into an elder as well, and the whole house is just decked out and absolutely beautiful. I love the Christmas decorations here so much. And so Meredith is preparing the main room for these two to finally consummate their marriage. Rosabelle is so grateful that Ernest agreed to wait until she was ready, especially. So Marisol ends up being courted by Rainier Harvey. You can see her older brother Ernest chaperoning at the piano in the back of the room, but still giving them a little bit of privacy because he understands. Unfortunately, everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and Cornelius dies. I am shook. I was not ready for Cornelius to die. This is from the flu that is going around again, and oh, good grief, it's so tragic. I feel horrible. And his poor wife. I mean, it's bad. It's really bad. So Albert is here to kind of solidify the relationship between Marisol and Rainier, and we end up having them have an adorable, cozy little winter celebration outside of St. Catherine's Cathedral. And so we get them married pretty quickly. It's very obviously a bit of a relationship that is cultivated by their brothers, Albert and Ernest. But, we make do, and they are both happy to participate in that. We also get another genie's lamp, so we got a lot of money going on here. And we also have this absolutely lovely little tea ceremony, or just tea party in general, a garden tea party at the Lawsons' new estate. All of the affluent women in town come by to celebrate. We have the Averys, the Kings, the Prices. It's just an absolutely lovely, lovely gathering. This is Ida Philippa. She's Flora's daughter, and I'm obsessed with her because look at her. I mean, can you blame me? She's gorgeous. She's got all of her father's good genes. And Flora and Rosabelle actually do develop a bit of a friendship, although Flora is very prim and proper, and Rosabelle is kind of struggling with her new role in a very, very affluent household, arguably one of the most affluent households. So we have this little celebration to honor Philippa's life, but unfortunately at the celebration, Philippa does die of old age, and boy does she not want to go, which is not how I anticipated, but she has her hand in every pot in the town. I mean, she is a big deal. So Philippa passing away was something. And then we have another death. Unfortunately, Ernest succumbs to the influenza that we have running through town. He has been sick for a long time, several days at this point, and it takes him, unfortunately. So we lose Ernest in the prime of his life, so early on into his marriage, and I really, really regret waiting for him and Rosabelle to have kids, because Rosabelle has one shot at an heir here, and the stress that I felt in this moment was remarkable. I was really hoping for multiples at the very least, because they would only have one child. However, luck is not with us. It is not in our favor, and she has a single daughter. So Rosabelle does not birth the heir to the King household. This is Rosetta Ernestine. She's named after both of her parents. And we are now forced into figuring out a new heir situation. This has never happened before in the neighborhood. And so Rosabelle enters a very long, very hard mourning period. Meanwhile, across the town, Charles learns of his brother's death, and Annalise is very excited about this because it means that they can move into the French Longbourn estate. So they pack up their household and their kids, and they are moving into this giant king estate. However, Louisa passes away, and for the first time in the entire challenge, and probably the only time, I'm so fed up with death that I let Rosabelle, who's best friends with Louisa, fight for her, and she is resurrected from the dead. And that, my friends, concludes season 1 of the Victorian Sims challenge.